Hey gang, Bob Wanamaker, the Thinking Strong Man. Back for another episode. Going to do something a little bit different today. I want to talk about some prehab routine for shoulders, and also want to show you how my disease and the challenges my disease impose upon my training routine give me additional insight into a lot of what I talk about. So, if you look, you can see how my upper spine is curved and how I'm sort of have a hunchback and am in a severe upper cross syndrome where everything this cross, so boom, boom, is foreshortened. Now typically we talk about an upper cross syndrome and it's correctable, and it comes largely, we think, from our current occupational trend and hobby trend and lifestyle of sitting with devices in front of us, sitting at the keyboard, well, in my case it's not, and in my case the upper cross syndrome really isn't correctable. So let's press the rewind button and go back to an incident that really helped me understand how bad this was, and that was in 2009. I had wanted to compete in Hope for Holidays, Willie Wessel's comp. And by the way, there's a new Fed that Willie started. Check it out on my Facebook page. He's a good guy. He deserves our support. Anyhow, I was training for the Hope, and this was in October of 2009, and I had a temporary shoulder dislocation while I was doing trap bar deadlift. And it turned out that the rotator cuff complex in my left shoulder was pretty deteriorated, and the AC joint was arthritic. Lots of things that weren't great going on. In particular, there were partial labral tears, and there were some pretty good tears in the tendons, specifically the infraspinatus tendon was in bad shape. So with the infraspinatus tendon being in bad shape, we went through some alternatives to get it fixed. And in general, a good prehab rehab routine is great. Now, I can't recommend that you do any of this for your specific circumstances. I'm not a doctor, not a physical therapist. But what I can do is show you what's worked for me. So, with that said, the very first thing that you can do during the course of the day is a doorway stretch. That's very simple. And my shoulder is tight, it's sore through here into the bicep a little bit. Pretty much always that way with me. But you just want to relax into the stretch as always, and that relaxation component is important. I think that's probably the most overlooked aspect of stretching that there is. So, I'm a big fan of a concept put forward by Tom Myers in a book called Anatomy Trains, where the fascia of the muscle, that sheath-like coating around the muscle, is actually a communications network. So if there's one part of the body, one muscle group in stress, the entire body is notified of that, and the entire body adjusts to that. So I found that stretching a lot of times doesn't really help, because, for example, stretching in the doorway stretch right now, my hips might not be in the most stable position. So that stress that's in my hips is going to get communicated throughout the fascia up into the shoulder, and the shoulder's not going to properly relax. So anything we can do to encourage a relaxed position while we're stretching a particular body part is good. And enter a little device that a buddy of mine, Chris Melton, is responsible for bringing to market. This is called the rotator. I know you're looking at it and you're saying, well, gosh, that's just a little piece of extruded plastic. How good can that be? It's fabulous. The one warning I would give you if you decide to use the rotator is it's very easy to overdo the stretching with it, paradoxically. I've had several consults tell me that they've hopped in too fast with stretching. The rotator enables you to do what you need to do. It's very simple to do an external rotation stretch. You then just kick this up. And I think you can see pretty readily that I'm getting a very good stretch on that external rotator cuff. And the great thing is I can adopt a nice, stable, relaxed posture with my feet, my hips. In fact, as you can imagine, you can sit down and do this and be incredibly relaxed. And that really does make a difference in your stretching. So the rotator is a great tool. It's one of the few standbys that I've found over the years. It just plain and simple works, and it seems to work for everybody. Now you can also go on the Googles and the YouTubes and you can find broomstick stretches that do roughly the same thing, but again, you have to be standing. It's not convenient. You don't relax quite as well into the stretch, in my opinion. So I don't think they're quite as good. The other classic stretch is, of course, a band dislocate, or a towel dislocate, or a broomstick dislocate. Depends on how flexible your shoulders are. Mine are terrible, so I'll take a mini band and grasp it about here and start. Now, a couple key things. Well, one key thing. While you're doing this, and this is incredibly important, you don't want your traps to come up and activate. You want your traps down. You want your scapula locked into place as much as possible. If you neglect to do that, you're losing the benefit. Within a session, as you get a little warmer, as your shoulders start to relax, you bring your grip in closer and closer, and you'll get more of a stretch on the dislocate, and obviously over time you can do the same thing. As far as number of reps go, I like to do somewhere between 40 and 60 per session in a rehab session. It's a good exercise to get the shoulders warmed up and ready for more serious work. Whether you do them sort of staggered, you do some rotator stretches, then you do the dislocates, or you do the dislocates all first. Those are the things you're going to have to experiment with to find out. Exercises. So exercises for the rotator cuff complex. There's internal and external rotation. I like using a band, and I like tying it off onto the power rack, but obviously there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You'll notice this band is cut in half, and that shows you how little tension, how little weight you really need to do these movements. And again, fairly simple. You're just going to pick the right tension so that you can do a whole bunch of reps. Again, think in terms of 60 to 100 reps. Very, very lightweight. Shouldn't be straining at all. Form should be perfect. You can do the internal, same thing, you know, very light, very high reps. You want to make sure above all else that you're isolating the rotator cuff complex itself. And there's a tendency on especially the externals that you'll start pushing down and activating tricep. You want to watch that and avoid that, obviously. So that's a universally pretty good exercise. I don't have anybody who's ever complained about that. Now, the next one I'm going to recommend, I do have people tell me that it doesn't work for them. And that would be using the shoulder horn. So, shoulder horn is just a piece of funkily, is that a word? Shoulder horn is a piece of aluminum tubing that's bent at certain angles, certain curves. Again, relatively inexpensive. Comes in different sizes. I believe this is a large or an extra large. You want to make sure you get the sizing that actually fits you. And the idea behind the shoulder horn is that you're going to be held in a scapular neutral position. So rather than being a little too far back when you do this motion, you want to be right at the motion, right at the plane where you're neutral with respect to your scapula. And the shoulder horn is designed to hold you in that position. In my very limited anecdotal world, let's say 20% of the people who try the shoulder horn dislike it because they feel it causes too much pain and it feels like an impingement is taking place. So if you're one of the 20% who attempt to use the shoulder horn and get pain, then obviously you shouldn't use it. But the idea, again, is fairly simple. It isolates the arm so that any rotation work is done in the scapular plane. And you can see how that arm is cocked forward. It's neutral with respect to the scapula, so any rotation I do is really, really limited to that rotator cuff complex. And yes, if you're just starting, I would recommend you don't use weight. Find out if this works for you at all. This is a very, very easy exercise to overdo, as well as the risk of impingement that some people report. So if, for example, I pick up a 10-pound dumbbell and I do 20 reps, my shoulder will ache for 36 hours. There will be some pretty significant pain there. You can't use a lot of weight with this. You want to keep the reps at a high to moderate range. So typically what I'll do is I'll do 3 sets of 15 to 20 reps with a very light weight, a weight that, you know, a lot of times I'll use a 2.5-pound dumbbell if I'm using dumbbells. Obviously, you can use a band and step on the band. That works just as well, if not better, because as you get to the top of the motion, you still have full resistance applied. Show you what I mean. So this is too much weight. I'm working way too hard. But as you get up to here, there's still firm resistance being applied, whereas with a dumbbell, since gravity stops pretty much somewhere about here, you're not going to get that resistance in the last portion of the movement to strengthen the muscle. So, want to keep that in mind as well. Again, I would use a band that has been cut in half if I'm going to use a mini band for that. Dale Buckberger has a book called... He knows his stuff. It's a good book. There's some unique exercises that you can do. You can also use YouTube and find out about YTWLs. I don't have anything that 1,000 other videos on YouTube can tell you about those, except again, lightweight, form, high reps. And then last but not least, one of the things that I like is a face pull that's a little bit modified. So a traditional face pull, and I apologize for the lack of room here, you would come sort of straight towards you. With the face pull apart, you want to sort of emphasize pulling apart as you move back. And again, high reps. So in a typical prehab session, rehab session, I'll do 400 reps. But very lightweight. Very focused on form, very focused on technique. In a nutshell, one of the things that I found is that by doing a prehab routine like this, 2 to 3 days a week, a couple hundred reps per session, I've had no issues with shoulders. Some occasional pain, but nothing major, nothing that says stop training by any means. So I think the idea of prehab is well invested. You can knock out 200 to 400 reps in 7 minutes. Once you get the routine down, you need to play with the routine, figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, investigate other ideas. I think you have everything you need to put together an intelligent, custom designed prehab routine that will help you with shoulder health immensely. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, feedback, feel free to reach out to me. You know how to find me if you're watching this. And in the meantime, remember, evolution matters. Train like an animal, think like a human.